I'm Kevin Rinke, and I'd like to welcome you to Beyond the Echo. I ran for governor in Michigan. After losing that election, my desire to look at issues that are important to the state or the country grew. There is so much static. There are so many opinions. Our news stations have gotten to the point where we don't know what news is anymore. Where do you go to get real facts? This is about real perspective for you. Beyond the Echo will cut through all the smoke, all the opinions. It's not about Republicans, it's not about Democrats. It's about the issues and what are real. Welcome to part 2 of Beyond the Echo as we interview candidates for MIGOP. And our second candidate was an ambassador to Fiji for the United States under the first Trump administration. And Ambassador Cella, if you would, tell us about yourself.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here, Mr. Rinke. I appreciate
Please, Kevin.
Kevin, always going forward. I am a native-born son of Michigan. I was raised in the city of Richmond in Macomb County, where my father was an attorney, a founding partner in a firm, and practiced there until his death in 1992. My mom was a homemaker. I'm the eldest of 3 children. I attended Notre Dame High School in Harper Woods, Michigan. I then went on to graduate from Hillsdale College. And really, since I was a wee lad, I was involved in the political arena, one form or another, transfixed by news papers, the Detroit News, the Detroit Free Press, morning news programs, afternoon programs, evening news programs, and my father's Wall Street Journal subscription, the News and Views section. So that really kind of drew me in. His law partner was a candidate for state rep, and we involved ourselves with that. And then it went on from there. Dad ran for city council. High school, I did the Close-Up program, which is a week in D.C. When I was at Hillsdale, I did the Washington Hillsdale internship program for a semester, further exposing me. And all of these are like waypoints pointing me in the direction to my vocation or my call, and at the intersection of public policy, politics, and government. And that's been the call in over the arc of my career. I have been married to my wife, Kristen, beloved and beautiful wife, Kristen, 20 years. We have 7 children, 4 boys and 3 girls.
You've been busy.
20 years. It's zone defense. Keep your hands up and your feet moving at all times. The zone can be penetrated on any given day, but it's a great blessing and a joy. We have raised our kids in Michigan. We lived in Virginia for a couple of years for work.
What was your work after Hillsdale?
Yeah, so I engaged in, while my dad was dying, I sold investments in insurance for John Hancock. And then the call again came into entering the arena full-time, managing political campaigns. So my first race was in 92, a congressional campaign for the late state senator Doug Carl. Won the primary. Went on to the general then to run a winning campaign, winning campaign for the late Representative Al Kukuk in Macomb Township. And
I remember Al.
Worked for him, and he was succeeded by his late wife Janet.
Yep.
And then went on to manage a state Senate campaign in Monroe County. And then from there, worked for former Senator Spence Abraham for 5 years. And then
out of D.C.?
Out of Michigan. I was one of his regional directors in Metro Detroit, his Southfield office. And then I went on to work for Tom Monahan of Domino's Pizza fame, handling his political affairs and government affairs. And it was then when I helped him launch the first sort of Catholic-based political action committee in the country, had an impact in some very high-stakes judicial confirmation battles in the early 2000s. And then from there, helped with 2 colleagues, launched an entity known as Fidelis that became Catholic Vote. And that is a very powerful issue advocacy organization across the country. had a very consequential role in President Trump's reelection in 2024. And then I was then asked by Fred Thompson to join his presidential campaign in 2008. We moved to Nashville with a newborn and a 22-month-old for a few months before we moved to D.C. for about a year and a half, 2 years. And then the opportunity came to work on the Hill for about a year and a half for Thaddeus McCotter as a senior advisor to him. And then began consulting work on the side, and it's been basically public affairs, media relations, no political consulting work, and have been doing that really since.
Do you have your own firm? Or
I
were
do,
you
yeah.
part of
It's called the Pontifex Group, so it's a little bit of a nod to my love of the Latin language, and it comes from the Latin pons and fec, which means Pontifex means bridge builder, which I am. That's what my nature is, Kevin. It's what I've done. It's who I am, and I love doing it, and I've done it with success over the years in whatever capacity I've served. And most recently, in the 2016 campaign, served after being chosen by President Trump to enter his campaign leadership role, coordinating the Catholic outreach across the country. Greatest campaign I've ever been a part of. It was this brassy, raw enterprise where you'd see people walking off of college campuses in the middle of their career to be a part of the moment with the man that is Donald Trump. Greatest campaign I've ever been a part of, an honor to be a part of it. That night, I commuted to Trump Tower for the final month of the campaign, and was there in the war room with him on election night. And then everybody migrated over to the party at the hotel. And after he won, it was about 10 to 2 in the morning. I think the final call was made, asked, could you go into the West Wing? And I said, I appreciate the honor, but I can't. The call was to help him win. I was a volunteer. They paid for my room and board and other reimbursements that I fronted the campaign money for. And I said, I just got to get home. I wanted him to win. And we have just eager to be back with my wife and certainly the newborn and the rest of the kids, and was told immediately, so we'll be ready because you'll probably be offered an ambassadorship. And never, ever crossed my mind, never pursued it. My ears kind of perked up because I know I could do the job if that was the call. An opportunity presented itself. And sure enough, 6 months later, I got the call from the White House to serve as ambassador to Fiji and 4 other South Pacific Island nations.
How long were you the ambassador?
I was confirmed in 2019, and then the tour of duty ended in early 2021. So on the clock for 16 months and in Fiji for 13. It was a period of intensive engagement. My predecessor had left 2.5 years ago prior. And
so we didn't have a representative in the Fiji Islands.
Correct. Or those 5 nations that you're accredited to: Kiribati, Nauru, Tuvalu, and Tonga. And, as an executive yourself, if the executive of any entity, corporate, religious, nonprofit, is not there, and you don't have a second in command, things can become overgrown. And I noticed that day one. Mm-hmm. So I really had to set about very intentionally of implementing some things that need to be implemented and course corrections. And immediately had an impact. Great people, and then of course the pandemic hit, which put a new twist on it all. So you had to operate in very tight straits, where the lockdown hammer fell from the host government, where you had curfews and isolation protocols that you had to follow. And it was a challenging time. Kristen and the kids evac'd on the last flight out of Fiji back to Michigan at the advice of the medical officer, who said, sir, if there's ever a medical emergency, whether there's an accident with Mrs. Cella or the children in a vehicle or at a pool, outside of a pandemic, you probably have 2 days in the trauma bay. And then a medevac from the U.S. is about 3 days. So again, best practice being just have them in the Midwest near a small community hospital where they have advanced life support. Whereas in a scenario where if the pandemic would have taken off, then a very fragile healthcare system would have been overwhelmed. And your child or your wife who may have been injured would have very limited ability to be tended to, and really allowing the locals to be tended to first is the priority. So, difficult decision. I lived like a chaste monk for about 4 years and stayed the course, but it allowed me really to scale my work with my Five Eyes partners. And doing some very high visibility public engagement, countering the encounters with China that were very much present and a threat, and ran through the tape with great success. Greatest job I ever had, and forever grateful to President Trump with choosing me to serve in that capacity.
Traditionally, ambassadors are major fundraisers for their presidents. Were you a major fundraiser for Donald Trump?
They can be. I guess if that's the measure, I guess I defied that history. I would say that I contributed in kind, I suppose, by being there on the ground on the front lines with him, helping drive the Catholic vote, identifying and driving the Catholic vote, particularly in the swing states we were targeting. But I guess you could say I'm an atypical measure in that respect. I was also atypical in that Kristen and I.
You're an operator. And that's not meant negatively.
Sure.
You roll up your sleeves, you go to work.
In the trenches fighting, it's really been the arc of my career of engaging in battles, high stakes, consequential battles, high visibility, and have a lasting impact. The other way, I'll just close on this point in that we also are atypical in that Kristen and I and the children were the largest family in State Department history to serve at an embassy overseas with our 7 kids. I think the closest was Joseph P. Kennedy, who I think they had 5 with them when he was at the court of St. James in England. So,
a mark of distinction.
Sure, it is
a mark of distinction.
Right. But it's a beautiful bridge building moment to civil society where I thought, when the opportunity came to serve and submit those names, Fiji was at the top of the list. Where could you go, lead and serve and have an impact? And I thought, find a country where Judeo-Christian roots are integrated into it and family life, and both are indeed in Fiji. So it was really a beautiful bridge building moment, a calling card to unite, connect, and have that connective tissue, a binding agent with civil society in very special ways. And I could regale you with very special moments with everyday Fijians.
Pick your biggest accomplishment as ambassador to Fiji.
There were a number of agreements we signed with Fiji and the other host nations involving economic development that had not been there before. So working with Ambassador Bob Lighthizer, we did that. And I would say that is like in the material sense, I would say this, I'll share with you this story, that I knew I had to make up for lost time. My nomination flapped in the wind by foot dragging from the former Senator Menendez and former Senator Bob Corker, not friends of President Trump at all. And if you were closer to the campaign in 2016, you were kind of targeted and slow walked, and I was definitely slow walked.
I think that happened to Ambassador Fisher as well.
It did, yeah. David really and his great wife Jennifer, they endured that crucible as well. I would say that my final night at post, I guess you could say distinction. I say this with humility. I was meeting with the Prime Minister's right-hand man and one of my greatest interlocutors that I had while there. And he said, you exchanged some token gifts and so forth, and I gave him some Michigan swag that I brought with me there. And,
green and white, right?
Well, it's actually wood. It was actually wooden coasters in the shape of the Lower Peninsula that my father-in-law made.
Obviously a joke. Being from Michigan State,
understood.
Yes,
my wife's a Wolverine. My dad went to the law school, and 4 of my wife's siblings went to.
I knew that you were affiliated to the U. Yeah, utmost respect for U of M. My sister graduated.
Yeah. So I'm sitting there with him, and he said, Joseph, I have to tell you something. He said, and he was a diplomat for Fiji to India, and he said, I have to tell you, in your time here, you have transformed diplomacy in Fiji. You have taken it to a level that it's never been at that I've ever seen. And that is a beautiful impact that you've had, and I'm forever grateful. So, kind of had to choke down the Adam's apple on that one.
Sure.
My nose was off the grindstone, and hearing that was, you don't really think about it because you just execute and execute and execute and execute and just get it done, doing what the president engaged you on to do. You're given specific orders, and I did so faithfully. And it was really a beautiful consolation to run through the tape with.
Let's transition from your history, which is obviously very impressive as an ambassador, and your activities with President Trump, to Michigan, the MIGOP role that you are currently auditioning for. And what do you see as the biggest opportunities for MIGOP under your leadership?
Well, as a businessman, you probably appreciate the acronym known as SWOT: strength, weakness, opportunities, and threats. So I come at it, with that approach. I see the strengths being that the footings have been poured and the pilings have been set in the party to rebuild a difficult position that Ambassador Hoekstra has had. A lot of tumult, a lot of chaos, a lot of drama. You know as well as I, a time in the past when there's been some great successes in the party, transiting from the final decade of the 2000s into the 2000s even, and some notable leaders there, Bobby Shostak among others, and I would say that that is an important strength, and to go back to the core of who we are as Republicans. And get it back to a professionally operating internal operation, but a professionally outward-facing operation, and doing one thing, and that is focusing on, like a laser beam, getting Republicans elected and defeating the Democrats. In the Cold War admonition that President Reagan gave, we win and they lose. So over the totality of my experience in fighting these consequential high-stakes battles on the front lines, high visibility in the state, but on the national level, my depth and breadth of hands-on campaign managerial experience, fundraising, communications, crisis management, and rapid fire response communications will all be brought to bear in this leadership capacity. I would say that on the weakness side, I would say that I think the party could operate more like a business. I mean, you're a businessman. I think that you could put some. Should I have the honor of being elected, day one would involve going to the front office, bringing some friends who have done great work in assessing things and how to get them better, faster, and stronger, and implement some best practices, whether it's market-based practices and contracting and open bids, and I think showing the customers the comings and goings of it in terms of a chairman's report, total transparency and accountability.
How do you define your customers in this particular instance? Is it the people of Michigan?
Yeah, great question.
Is it the delegates, or is it the elected officials of Michigan?
Well, the Republican Party as a business has, I would say, accountability to the following. I would say to its donors. I would say to the grassroots, i.e. the delegates. And I would say the candidates. And, as you pointed out, firstly, the citizens of Michigan. It really has to be a concierge engagement, a stewardship, having a sensitive eye and a sensitive hand as to what the feedback and the demands of the clientele are, and that's very important. I think there's a plethora of opportunities ranging from the fundraising. There are sort of the second generation of past donors who are stepping up to me. They believe in my leadership capability and the direction of where I would take the party. Communications-wise, I have some bold ideas that'll be soon rolling out in a formal plan of what I intend to do, using some new media and some media within the party that has never been done. Education for the grassroots Kevin, the people, it's striking traveling across the state how people thirst for information and direction, whether it's newly registered precinct delegates or candidates or prospective candidates, campaign managers, sort of like the how-to. Some are already there and know what to do, but they're right now after President Trump's great win, they're full of joy. They're relieved, but they're steeled with resolve because they just want to keep going. Great opportunity to use that fulcrum of his win in 2024 and win in 2026. The threat, I would say, would be, anything. There's some debt being carried. There's some FEC fines coming down. But you can never really take for granted the midterm election. So that's a threat. You got to be aware of the enemy and be ready to punch back. But stay laser focused on backing, identifying, preparing, and supporting the candidates after the primary that have the best chance of beating the Democrats in these critical fights that await us.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting. Respect all of the party chairs. It's easy to be in a position to critique the success or the operation of the party while they're in the position. There seems to be a consensus that something has been missing in the party. From your perspective, and by the way, it's not a short-term miss. The effectiveness of the party hasn't been on an upward climb. It's either been horizontal or slightly down. What do you attribute that to?
It's an astute observation. I think that behind any strong leader, there is consequential impact. You've seen it, I'm sure, inside of politics and business, even in the religious sphere and nonprofit sphere. So I think a leader with strong principles, focused on the mission at hand, a steady hand on the tiller, sound judgment, navigating through the undulations of life and work, whatever they may be, is critical. So I think you go back to, again, the arc of history. George Santayana's great quote, if you don't remember history, you're doomed to repeat it. Mm-hmm. So I think you look at the successes of the Republican Party after the Milliken years, it was on that upward ascent that you spoke of. And whether it was the Senate being taken over by the Republicans in 1984, to Governor Engler being elected in 1990, to the State House becoming split between the Republicans and the Democrats after the 1992 elections. In 1994, you had Candace Miller oust Dick Austin, 40-year Secretary of State, mm-hmm. first female Secretary of State in Michigan.
Candace is a very dear friend. Think the world of her.
Great lady, fellow Macomb County resident, and longtime friend. Fought on the front lines with her in 1994. And then you also had the State House taken over by Republicans in 1994. Happy to say Speaker Hall, who I call Matt Hall, the wrecking ball, now at the helm in the State House, doing some very important work, particularly on oversight. And then you had Senator Spence, if I didn't mention Spence Abraham in his bid for U.S. Senate, and then of course Newt Gingrich in his success in taking control of the U.S. House. So all very consequential years. We gained control of the Michigan Supreme Court on that ascent and held it for until recent years. So I think that as in life, pendulums swing. I'm not going to name or shame or anybody, but
it's not about that. Yeah. It is what it is.
It is what it is. So
I'm looking deeper because I believe the party needs someone to articulate a very clear direction. And I believe that leader needs to recognize that for the party to succeed, they have to create an environment for the people that they're leading to be successful.
Yeah, indeed.
And people are looking for, where are we going? How are we going to get there? Who do we go to for help? How are we doing along the way? And if we believe in you, if we follow you, what's in it for them?
Right.
And when I ran as a gubernatorial candidate, maybe I didn't articulate my message well enough. But interestingly enough, on Election Day, I was the only Republican that pulled and beat Gretchen Whitmer with a vision for
right.
Michigan
Yeah.
that represented all of the people of Michigan. In your case, I think that the party needs a fire in its belly.
Yeah.
How are you going to light that fire?
Well, it's a great question. To answer your first question, I mean, people are really thirsting for that directional leadership, that intentional leadership, focused leadership by somebody who has the chops and the brass to lead, serve, fight, and win. And the arc of my career has been that in multiple levels, whether on the state level or the federal level, in campaigns. I put the wood to the left, to Democrats in the fights that we've fought. And I would say that those that I've engaged to support my campaign, again, whether past donors, their offspring, or people out of state even who have Michigan ties that know and appreciate my leadership and my aims for the party, see it as an investment and an opportunity to again propel the party to the heights that it has been and really needs to be. And I have again a track record of bringing things where the call has been made. You need somebody to parachute in and take control, take command, grab a hold of that tiller, and steer the ship. So I've done it in the past.
Did somebody call you to run for this?
No, I sat down with a reporter, actually, ironically, in the spring of last year to talk about the China stuff. I've been working at countering the China deals that Governor Whitmer has been advancing with these 2 Chinese Communist Party tied battery plants successfully. More work needs to be done. And I sat down with him. I barely sat down, and this is before even Ambassador Hoekstra became a possibility. He said, "Hey, have you ever thought about becoming Michigan Republican Party chairman?" Again, never talked about that notion with anybody ever. I said, no, not. I think there's some drama going on. I think you probably need some sort of an elder statesman to come in and serve in that capacity. I mean, little did I know that it eventually would become Ambassador Hoekstra. And, kind of shelved in the back of my mind and carried on with my work and life and so forth. And then when he was selected by President Trump to serve as the next ambassador to Canada, my wheels began turning when, perhaps that early whisper in my ear or question happened that might have been an early sign to consider it. So I had been approached by people just over the last couple of years to run for office, local office, federal office. Not my time, not my call, and just began thinking about it, and then reached out to a couple of people myself to confer and collaborate, and then I guess word started to spread, and people started to call me who have been longtime party activists and encouraging me and think that I bring a unique set of deliverables that my worthy opponents don't, and have a great chance of winning.
Would this be a full-time job for you?
It would be a full-time job, and it would be probably a more than full-time job, considering.
Yeah, full-time isn't 40 hours a week.
So this is. I guess you're really never off call, as they
Right.
say, and as it was the case when I was an ambassador and other work that I've done. So again, there are some things that need to be triaged, and but it certainly would require great dedication and focus.
Where in the party, and there seems to be, and I don't understand it, by the way, and I don't like it in my own party, that there appears to be a split on what's a conservative, what's a Republican,
Yeah.
Who's worthy of the title. And I look at the party as an umbrella that has many pieces under that umbrella. I know what my personal values are, how I live my life, how I choose to pray and treat the norms within society. And for me, I keep that personal. And yet we have within the party people that want to judge conservatives. And that splits us. That makes us vulnerable. Where in the spectrum does Ambassador Cella fall in that party?
Yeah. Well, I abide by really the model that President Trump exemplified for us in 2024, where you could say it is I would say, an improved upon Reagan big tent, where he expanded the footprint of those who have commonality with the Republican Party. So you have your base Republicans, and you have your Republicans who might not agree with all of the platform, and you even have some others that are non-Republicans. I was at this forum in Metro Detroit on Sunday, and a libertarian young man was there, and he says, "What are you going to do with the libertarians?" I said, "Well, what other convention other than did President Trump go to in 2024?" And he said, "The Libertarian Convention." So he was very excited about that. I mean, President Trump kind of pushed the envelope and showed that you have elements of your principles and messaging that really connect with all people. I think another thing it's important for us to abide by is another adage from President Reagan, is that my 80% ally is not my 20% enemy.
Yeah, I say that often. That is so important, because leaders within the state, be it of the Republican Party or the whole state, have to be able to interact with all the people in Michigan. They can live their life to a certain set of standards. They can manage to a certain set of standards, but they have to be able to interact respectfully with everyone within Michigan. And Reagan was so wise. We've got plenty of issues in that 80% that we agree upon that need to be fixed, that we don't even have to address the 20%. I mean, God knows Michigan has lots of opportunity.
Indeed.
How does the Michigan GOP chair interact with the governor of Michigan? What's that relationship look like in your opinion?
The current governor?
No.
Any
No.
governor. The Republican governor.
Under the assumption that there's a Republican governor. What is that relationship like?
Yeah, a great question. I think you look at the Republican governor as almost the spiritual father or mother of the party. You know, the chairman is chosen by the delegates, but I would say that the office of governor, there comes great moral authority, party moral authority in terms of the abiding principles of the party's platform, certainly the governance of the party of Michigan and its bylaws, to provide that directional leadership. So I think that is very important. I think that the chairman is charged with his duties by the delegates that vote him or her in, and then
Does that create a conflict potentially between a governor that wants to accomplish something and the delegates who elect a chairman?
Yeah,
And maybe looking at that glass from a different angle?
I would hope that there's commonality. There may be differences. I mean, you well pointed out the fissures that are numerous, but I think it's just important to engage and stay singularly focused on that Reagan mantra of "we win, they lose," finding the best Republicans that cleared the primary and can beat the Democrats in the most competitive races. That is critical. So I would say that using that commonality, and I would say there's probably very little difference between the Republican governor and the chairman, at least not there ought to be. But they really should work hand in hand towards that objective of Republicans getting elected and Democrats being using best practices.
Yeah, I think in our busy lives, many people who are really well-intended don't understand the complexity of the relationships to move the state forward and to move the party forward, and how that my GOP chair communicates and functions, because the delegates are the voice. They're knocking doors. They're out there working. They're doing
In the trenches.
all of the things in the trenches that we need to do better than Democrats, because candidly, there are less Republicans in Michigan than there are
Yeah.
Democrats.
And you saw them perform really at a very high level in 2024.
the best I've ever seen.
And a beautiful win by President Trump. So it's I think, again, using that fulcrum that we have in Michigan in 2024, propelling into 2026, whoever the gubernatorial nominee and eventual governor is, God willing, to, again, just build on that success, take the party to that next level, because a governor can be very consequential. When you had governors in the past, you'd have the Governor's Club, you'd have Team Michigan. That is, I think, a very steadying impact on the party. It infuses the party with money. And I think it is also, again, another pair of oars in the water, if you will speak, rowing to that objective of Republicans winning and Democrats losing.
Yeah, it's interesting because different governors in my lifetime have interacted very differently with the party. I was a young man when Bill Milliken was finishing, and how he interacted with the party, I thought was very, very impressive. John Engler took maybe a more aggressive role, and Rick Snyder was active but seemed to step back. And when you look at their respective party chair people that they were working with, what type of personality are you going to work best with?
Well, I, by my nature, as I mentioned to you earlier, I'm a bridge builder. Again, it's who I am. It's what I do. I've done with great success in whatever sector or strata I've served. And on my day one speech at the embassy in Fiji, I said three things. I told my embassy colleagues that numbered 150 about, and said, I'm gonna love you and protect you as though you were my own family. We're going to treat all people with dignity, worth, and respect, and including ourselves, but those we interact with. But then we'll do all things legally, morally, and ethically. So again, I set that bar to let them know who I was and my priorities, and those would be my guides as party chairman. But the other mention that two footnotes that I left them with was that I'm going to take my desk to your door. I'm going to come to you. These were people that were without the captain at the helm for 2.5 years. And again, that can have quite a negative impact.
Certainly on morale. And morale is part of it. I personally believe that a big part of Michigan's struggles is that many people in Michigan have stopped being proud of Michigan and what she stands for.
Yeah, that's a great observation. I think that what a beautiful land we have been blessed to live in. The history is rich. We have been on the front lines of wars back to the Civil War with, and then the arsenal of democracy during World War II. Certainly in other conflicts that have gone following that. So it really is, again, back to the idea of sort of the state of the party, the state of grassroots, and it includes the citizens of Michigan, where I think we've been through a tough time. The pandemic, I think, certainly brought us to a place in history we've never been at since the early 20th century with the Spanish flu. Kind of shook things up culturally, I think. But I think people just kind of thirst. I think they thirst for that, I think, that clear-headedness, clear-principledness, and somebody driving it, and they just thirst. They want to be listened to. They want to be confided in and conferred with. And again, don't know the cause and effect, but it's been percolating for some time. And there's just a little bit of a fracturing in society and some detachment, and certainly as we've observed with the party. But I think, again, I consider that one of the O's and opportunity of the SWOT analysis for the next chairman.
It's satisfying to me as a citizen when our leaders state what they're going to do and then do it. And we're hearing from Washington, whether you agree or disagree, when you can identify that you were told what you were going to experience, and you make a choice. You get the right to vote when the majority rules, and in this case, not only did the majority of voters favor Donald Trump, our electoral college made it a landslide. And I think it's okay to say a mandate. Those on the left want to fight and say, oh, it was only, 1.8%, and that was less than Joe Biden's margin of victory. From an electoral perspective, it was not as significant, and it was not, in my view, as transparent as what Donald Trump's victory was.
You're correct. I think as much as they would like to put an asterisk after 2024, there is no asterisk. That was a resounding win, and really
they're trying to cast doubt.
A consequential leader in 2016, and I think he is. We're already seeing now the consequential leader that he is. He is going to scale what he did in 16, and it's really dizzying to think, Kevin, if you consider, even before he was inaugurated, things were happening. That consequential, I would say the Trump effect has been happening, whether it's restoring the LNG shipments to Europe. It just happened. And you saw countries like Mexico getting on sort of a better footing and accommodating for what is coming, and bringing order to a disordered immigration system. So more to come, and if you probably have tracked this daily, but it is dizzying to see him living out his campaign promises and seeing that manifestation of promises made, promises kept.
Yeah, I kind of describe President Trump as the really strict teacher that got the best out of his students. Because in my view, everyone in America will benefit from the actions that Donald Trump takes. You look at Black Americans in Donald Trump's 4-year term, 16 to 20, their personal net worth was up 40%, and under Joe Biden declined 47%. You know, opportunity, success, stability, attitude, confidence,
patriotism,
all are what make America great. And candidly, I think that's what we're missing in Michigan. It's going to be a strong leader that's going to do the right thing versus the popular thing, that wants to be there to make a difference that isn't a 4-year difference or an 8-year difference, but is a transformational difference. When you think about, there was a time in our country's history, and you obviously enjoy history, as do I, where Detroit was the 3rd largest city in America. And until Michigan and Detroit have 3 million people living in it, we haven't come back. Until Michigan and Detroit is one of the 5 wealthiest states, and wealth can be defined by personal net worth or just a business environment, and I'm using it in the broad sense, where the average Michigander has opportunity. Currently, I think in the 50 states that we are 41st in opportunity.
You're right.
And terrible with the natural resources that we have, with the manufacturing expertise that we have. And I look at the role as my GOP to be in conjunction with helping us elect now a senator, a governor, 2 Supreme Court seats, which will be up, Secretary of State, Lieutenant Governor, and the other affiliated positions. And we have time to prove to the people, not just to be political, but to prove to the people that joining our party and how we communicate is common sense. It is conservative in our values and our nature, but respectful to all people in Michigan. And damn it, I want to fight for that. That's what motivates me. And I'm not willing to accept anything less.
I'll tell you, it's time. It's time we get after it. You and I woke up 2 days ago. Gary Peters was running for re-election in 2026 by all measures. We woke up yesterday morning. That has changed. we have the greatest opportunity in decades in Michigan.
We have to put together a slate that runs consistently of people that not only can win in a primary, but that can win in a general. And it's a very unique algorithm that some egos are going to have to step aside or be modified a bit. And if we're really interested in taking advantage of this opportunity, I didn't mean to cut you off, Ambassador.
Okay, I'll finish.
I get excited about it as well, and I can see your enthusiasm, so I appreciate it. Please, you finish.
Sure. So I would just say that it is we are at an inflection point to have the Michigan Republican Party restore leadership in Michigan at a point that it hasn't been in decades through the election of key state and federal office holders. And it is imperative to have somebody helming the Michigan Republican Party who has fought the fights and has won them with a clear track record, not just affiliations and with roles and appointments, but knowing, being called into the fight because you bring a certain
skill
set
set
of tools,
Yeah.
and then knowing how to use those tools efficaciously in the fight, the fights that are high visibility, consequential, and have lasting effects. I am that person, and there is no shortage of these opportunities, these combat operations, political combat operations, if you'd say, awaiting us in 2026. I would also posit that Michigan almost has the first in the nation primary before us, and we will be the first in the nation primary through the special election in the 35th State Senate District. That falls within Midland Bay City, Saginaw. Mm-hmm. President Trump won those counties by 54.8%. That district, which was held by Senator Rivett, now Congresswoman Rivett, replacing Dan Kildee, is a 52% base. I would say, historically speaking, in that region, we have won elections. Joel Goujon won one in the early 90s. And I think that's gettable with the right candidate. Again, you talked about slates, but whoever clears that primary, everybody should descend on that district across Michigan. They should be motivated, use that fulcrum, use that resolve, that they're steeled with that resolve to fight. No greater exercise of spring training for the 2026 midterms than would be that special election in the 35th. That would be very consequential, as you probably know, in that if that is picked up by a Republican, the Senate would then be tied 1919. And then if a Republican just happens to not show up to work on a particular day on a particular vote, Lieutenant Governor Gilchrist's vote will have no impact, and thereby reining in, I would say, Governor Whitmer for the remainder of her term, and I think officially becomes a lame duck and at long last staunching the damage that she's done to the state.
Yeah, it was a great victory for President Trump. It was a solid victory for Republicans across the country. And I think now in Michigan, what we really need to do is put our foot on the gas. We don't have time to take a deep breath. We need to elect a great MIGOP chair. And I appreciate you articulating your vision for that role. I want to have you answer a couple of questions before we wrap up.
Sure.
You're standing on the stage, and the delegates are giving you their unbridled attention. Why you?
Why me? Why will I serve as the next best chairman of the Michigan Republican Party? I stand apart from them in that I have the bona fides, having been chosen by President Trump to fight by his side in his 2016 campaign, serving as an advisor in his 2024 campaign, and serve at his choosing as a United States ambassador, fighting consequential, high visibility fights, having an impact that continues to be had. And then I'm not in Lansing, nor am I of Lansing. I'm a Lansing outsider. I would bring fresh ideas. I would bring tenacious work ethic. I would bring a judicious temperament, and I bring the character that is unimpeachable, and a way of building bridges with people who others might not think of doing or have the ability to do. I love doing it and have done so with success. Now you can build those bridges and try to connect, but it might not be reciprocated. But I have the experience, the temperament, the success track record of bringing all the deliverables necessary to that capacity, from fundraising to mobilizing grassroots to communications, that are the key deliverables to ensure that we have success up and down the ticket in 2026.
There you have it. The people of Michigan have a really important decision to make. And
the stakes are very high.
Yeah, the stakes are very, very high. We're fortunate, in my view, to have 4 people who bring very different qualifications. And that's why I appreciate you coming. And we'll have all 4 of the candidates articulate their positions. If people are stimulated in their minds and they want to ask you questions based on seeing this, and this is going to drop next Tuesday.
Great.
So there's ample time for people to digest it. If you would, tell them how to get a hold of you.
Firstly, Kevin, thank you for this opportunity and great platform. I think the more information, the better, so that that delegates and others can make a fully informed decision in this important race. I may be contacted through several media. First, my email is josephjcella@gmail.com. My mobile number is 703-286-9677. I'm on X, otherwise known as Twitter, at MIGOP Great Again. Also on Facebook at Joseph Cella. And those are the best media to contact me, and look forward to hearing from you one way or another.
Well, thank you, Ambassador Cella. It's nice to get to know you better.
Yeah, likewise.
And appreciate you being in the arena.
Thank you for your leadership in multiple arenas.
Well, you know what? I love Michigan, and I have very high hopes for Michigan. Thanks for tuning in to Beyond the Echo. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe so you never miss an update. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so drop us a comment and share the podcast with your friends. Stay connected and keep the conversation going by following us on social media. Until next time, keep exploring beyond the echo.